Welcome to the Campfire Curmudgeon Podcast.
Yes, welcome.
I'm Heidi S., and my co-host
is Nicholas Jones.
What are we talking about today, Nick?
We're talking about how I'm a spoil sport in a very depressing way.
And I'm the sad one today. We're talking about, do the dead visit us? Do our deceased friends, relatives, do they come back? Do they leave signs? Kind of like that pennies from heaven sort of stuff that people are always talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And as Nick was letting us know, he doesn't think so.
I really don't, and it sucks, because it's one of those things where it's like, you're just a nihilist, and it's like, no, I'm trying to appreciate the way things actually are. And when I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, like, am I thinking about this because I want to feel this? No, I'm missing, 3 out of 4 grandparents, and I miss them all dearly. I'd like to spend an afternoon or another year with them around.
So you don't think that you've ever had anything like maybe their favorite song come on the radio when you're thinking about them, or like anything that you would consider coincidental?
Usually it's the opposite. Like, I'll be thinking of, like, the song will come on and it will remind me of them, and I think that most people, their subconscious does that, where in their experience of it is, I was thinking about them, and then I heard the song on the radio.
But you've never, ever had it the other way, where you've been thinking about a family or a friend or
No.
missing them? Never?
Mm-mm.
That's interesting. So I think a lot of people...
But that's me, and that's a lot of people are different, because, like, my mom, for example, there's a couple stories that my mom has. Every time she sees a cardinal, because cardinals are,
bird, yeah.
Yes, they are a bird.
No, I said, like, the bird, like, not like a religious cardinal or, like, a sports...
I am a St. Louis Cardinals fan, and we are in Arizona, the home of the Arizona Cardinals, but I'm talking about the bird, yes. Tweet? No, they sound like... That's what
that was bird calls with Nicholas Jones.
Yes, that's what a cardinal sounds like. The bird. I don't know about the clergy. But a cardinal means spiritually that's the spirit of a passed on relative.
Just any, or not one specific?
Usually it's someone that you've been remembering. So with my mom and my cousin Kay, my mom lost her mom, my grandma, in 2015, and it's been 2 years, but it doesn't feel like it is. For her, it still feels like it was yesterday. And so my mom, she grieves a lot, but she's not going to be ever done missing her mom. And then she'd see a cardinal, and she's like, oh, it's my mom. Or like my cousin Kay lost her mom this year, and I actually had a conversation with Kay in 2006. This was 11 years ago, when I was kind of a dick atheist.
Oh, no.
Like, your beliefs are crap, and I'm just doing that. And I was kind of having a conversation with Kay, and I was like,
you're much less insufferable now.
I would hope so. I hope there's more than just aging than hurting. I hope there's some wisdom trade-off. But who knows? That remains to be seen. But with Kay, I remember, I go, well, like, what are you expecting? She goes, well, I have to believe that, I'm going to see my parents again after they go. I mean, I have, she's like, it's, she couldn't live in a world and think about things and believe things. Reality is, almost not worth it if the final goodbye is the final goodbye, right? Like, I'm not saying she's delusional. I'm not saying basically that's how she saw things. And part of it was that, we don't know what happens when the curtain drops.
But why a cardinal? Is that some sort of myth? I've actually never heard of that.
I thought it was a Catholic thing, but
okay.
But it could be like old white people mything, like just culture appropriation, and like, oh well, I read it in a Hallmark card, and the Hallmark card got it from Thai culture.
Because in my family, like my grandpa would always say it's a crow. If you see a crow or a blackbird, that's like supposed to be the spirit of the dead, but. That's not a Catholic thing, so I don't know.
Well, the Catholics have incorporated a lot of, other.
That's why I was interested.
Beliefs.
You should look that up. See if that's from like a specific system of belief or something. Because that's interesting. I've never heard of that. I thought that you were going to say it was specific to a family member, like a family member liked cardinals or something.
No, I mean, every time, like, in the last, 10, 15 years, anytime, like, my mom or dad would see a cardinal, they'd be like, oh, look, a cardinal. And I'd be like, yeah, it's a cool bird, and I like the team. Go Cards. But they'd be like, no, it means that, it's the spirit of someone that you love that's gone. And I'm just like, well, could be that. Could be just it built a nest over there and laid some eggs. And then we'll get a different cardinal. And I don't know what the lifespan of a bird is. Is it like a week?
Well, I think they live longer than that. Well, while you're looking that up, I'm going to talk about a story. You could say with a dead relative visiting. This actually wasn't my relative. It was my best friend, Paula. From the time that I met her, one of her grandmothers had already been deceased. She had passed away when my friend was very young. We've known each other since we were 8 years old. So this was some years later. I don't remember how old we were, but it feels like we must have been like early high school, maybe 14 years old or so. And her mom gave us free reign to paint in their spare bedroom, which was really exciting. This was a room. They didn't really use it much. It was kind of like a guest room if guests stayed, but most of the time they used it for storage. Occasionally we'd spend the night in there, but Paula never really seemed to like to go in that room. But we were in there painting, and I don't mean just like, painting the walls. Like, we painted the walls a solid color. Then we were using like gold paint and stuff to paint like all sorts of, decorations.
Okay.
Like, I was painting a phoenix on the wall, which at the time I was super proud of. I thought it looked real cool.
Does it look like the City of Phoenix logo?
No.
Okay. Well, it's purple. I figured you'd like it.
Well, we didn't do purple. I think it was like the theme that Paula decided was red and gold or something like that. I don't remember really, but I was painting this, and you've seen me. I pretty much always have my hair just down straight. How it is, it does what it wants. I very rarely put it up, even when I should, like, power tools and stuff, but whatever. I'm sure I had it down while I was painting.
That explains those massive bald spots.
Rude! Rude! Don't give me a complex.
You've been belt sanding.
You're a horrible, horrible person.
You've been belt sanding again.
For those listeners who've never seen me, I don't have any bald spots. He's going to make me cry. I'm delicate. Anyways, I was painting on this wall, and I had my back turned to Paula, she had been painting on the opposite wall. And it felt like she was behind me and had picked up all of my hair, kind of in like a ponytail, like lifted it up, and then it just like dropped it. And I felt all my hair just like hit my back. And I kept painting because I was like, detail, being very careful. And I was like, stop it. She's like, what? Stop what? I'm like, my hair. Stop messing with my hair. She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, don't act like you don't know. She's like, what are you talking about? I turn around. Not only is she on the far side of the room, but she's on like a little step stool painting something close to the ceiling that she's trying to concentrate on. And I was like, that wasn't you? You didn't pick up my hair? And she kind of looked at me and she's like, no. But that's interesting you say that. She's like, you know that my grandmother died in this room. And I was like, no, I didn't. I thought that she passed away before you moved to Arizona. She said, no, my grandmother lived with us. This was her bedroom. This was where she passed away. And I just thought that was so interesting. Because she was kind of, I mean, we had known each other for so long. It was like my sister, not really my friend, I mean, she's my friend. Like, that sounds like I'm like, we're not friends.
I get it. You have a closer than friendship bond.
So it was kind of like, she was like, it's like family. Maybe she was trying to let you know, like, hey, you're my family too, which I thought was kind of sweet. And that was something that is hard to explain because it's very obvious. I know you've probably never had long hair.
In 8th grade.
This long?
In 1990. No,
oh, man,
no, 1996. I don't think I allowed pictures taken that year.
We're gonna message your mom and be like, hey, for the podcast, we need some pictures.
There's a black hole of pictures that exists. It's from like 1997 to like
so we're gonna get a sketch artist.
2002, with the one exception of my senior photos.
I'm gonna Photoshop you with long hair, like my hair. Long blonde hair.
I'll look like Edgar Winter.
But if you've ever had hair this long, when somebody, like, there's that very distinct feeling of your hair just falling. When you know it's like up and you let it go. So that was kind of not something I could really replicate or explain away. And just the coincidence, as you would call it, of it happening in a room that had so much, I guess, energy was kind of interesting to me.
Yeah.
Especially since it wasn't something that I knew and was thinking about while I was in there, like, oh, somebody died in here. Like, I never knew that. I had known her for years, but for some reason, I guess, when she had told me, I just wasn't putting two and two together that was that house that she was already in
But
Arizona.
maybe you had already done that. Your subconscious put that together.
You think so?
Yeah. We're the last people to know what we're actually thinking.
She didn't really tell me about it in detail, because it's one of those things, especially when you're young and you know that somebody's grandparent has died, you don't, when you're so young, you're just like, oh, you don't talk about it. You're just like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
You know? And you're like, oh, I'm not gonna bring that up. I'm losing my voice today. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So one of the stories that I wanted to tell, and it's one of those where it's like, I don't know. My mom's, like, my grandpa Jack died in 2010, and he was basically my step-grandpa. He married my grandma in 1980 before I was even born. But my grandfather, my biological grandpa, his name's John, he's been out of the picture since late, 70s, and then, after, my mom, after, they became adults and stuff, he kind of reintroduced himself, and now we've kind of reconciled, and so we know John, but I know John, but not in like a
not as your grandfather.
Yeah, as my grandfatherly role, but I share genes with him. He's a tall guy, and if you look at pictures in the 60s from him, I look exactly like him. But after my grandpa Jack died, before my grandma died, John was in town in Omaha, and my mom likes to tell this story. She goes, her and John were, they were in the garage together looking at some stuff, or just looking just through some of the stuff in the garage, and they're kind of like laughing and like, getting that old chemistry that brought them together in like the 50s, just, and my mom's just like, what are you doing, Mom? Like don't get friendly with him.
Oh, no.
Like don't get like, just the goo eyes, because it's like, it's Dad. He's a dick. Like, she's just like, what are you doing? And so they're in the garage, my grandmother and my grandfather, and all of a sudden, like, this golf bag that's on the other side of the garage falls off the top shelf and lands with a thud.
Oh, wow.
And my grandma and my mom go, that was Jack, my grandfather. Like,
oh my
hey,
gosh.
What are you doing? Like, you two quit it. Knock it off.
Don't even think about it.
Yeah. And it's just funny because it's like, yeah, Grandpa Jack, he was mild-mannered. I never knew him as a yeller, but he would definitely, you wouldn't cross him. You wouldn't mess with him because he was a steel worker. He was an iron and duct worker.
Strong guy.
Yeah. Short, little, squat guy, and, just so giving and so nice, but sometimes quiet, and just wanted a cigarette, and he wanted to barbecue and smoke, and play pinochle, and he was the luckiest guy.
What is that game even?
I think it's like slots that come on trading cards, or not. No, pinochle is a card game, but he also used to play. What's the stupid? They might not have them here, but they're like, they come in stacks of cards, and you basically peel one row open. It's like a lottery thing, but
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, it's killing me that I don't know.
I also don't play basically any board games or card games.
This would be gambling. You'd go out to a bar or something, and you'd buy a stack of them, and you'd peel it, and if you won, you'd go get cash or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
He never, did. I mean, he would just do it to mess around. It'd just be like, he wouldn't gamble actual money, but he always won.
Oh my gosh.
Always won. But it's so funny, like, when he sees, my grandma's ex-husband.
Yeah, he's like, back off.
Like, getting chummy with his wife.
Oh.
And he's just like,
that's pretty funny.
You left. I had to step in. And then it's like, what am I going to do? He's like, "Poof, just get out of my garage.
Yeah, don't touch my things.
So
stay away from my wife, stay away from my things.
Yeah, and so we've like, and this is a story, this happened, my grandma died in 2015, and so this happened like in 2012, 2013, and when I moved out here in 2011, like, yeah, I've been out to see John, and he's the closest, in terms of geography, like blood family that I actually have. But yeah, I've been out to visit him twice, and I'm probably gonna go sometime soon because he lives right on the water of the Colorado. It's pretty neat. But yeah, it's just interesting when it's like Mom tells that story, and part of me is just like, yeah, why not? Like,
it'd be interesting. Did he seem like he believed that as well?
I don't know.
You should ask him.
he has a kind of willful charm and charisma that you're just like, he can talk your ear off.
So he'll turn you into a believer? Is that what you're saying?
No, three-fifths of it are half-truths to make himself look better, or but it's part of it's just like, me, I'm a very, you're not being literal, so therefore you're lying. Like,
yes, I know.
And I can't abide it. And also it's like, well, that kind of stifles your humanity, Nick. Like, just like when people...
just a little
like,
bit.
When people meet you and, like, girlfriends meet you, it's just like, that's one thing. It's just like, oh, I didn't realize he was...
so literal.
Like, and it's like, is it insufferable? I like
it can be.
I'm
sorry, I just wanted to see your face.
No. As I've gotten older, I've realized, like, hey, there's a limit to it, right? Like, everybody appreciates somebody they know. It's like, oh, yeah, he's got a level head on him. Doesn't, like, think kooky things, like, because, like flat earthers or something. Or, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer? Okay. Oh, okay. And so when, somebody's just like, well, actually, like, okay, no one wants to be around that person. But it's about finding kind of a happy peace with just like, you know what, some stuff I'm going to let go. I'm not going to be, like, private immediately to my relatives, or even sometimes in my own head, I'm like, does it really matter?
Does anything really matter?
No, I mean, is it really important to you to point out to grieving family or grieving friends to be like, well, I don't believe in an afterlife, and it's like, and that means you're never gonna see your mom again. It's like, you dick. Like, you complete dick. It's like, how do you know? How can you say that with any sense of confidence?
How do you know? Why do you think that there's nothing afterwards?
I think life is consciousness, and after consciousness, like, there's like, I've been under anesthesia, and it was like time travel, because it's like, oh, I wasn't conscious for this. I didn't feel anything. It was just nothing. And then the only reason it wasn't death is that I was revived from surgery. I was revived from deep anesthesia where, my higher order, I didn't dream. You don't dream under propofol. It's blackness.
Do you think that maybe part of why you feel like that is because you've never had any sort of experience like this? Like, you've never felt like you were visited by a past friend or family member? Do you think maybe that plays into it? Like, do you think that if you had an experience like that really made you think, would that maybe change your mind or make you rethink things, do you think?
I mean, I think I've had interesting, like, mental experiences.
Elaborate.
Drugs.
Oh.
I think I've had, like, meditative state or hypnotic states where, like, the brain is doing something it doesn't do in everyday life, going through your thoughts and, getting your tasks done at work, or just coming home and be like, me need food, okay, me need entertainment. And
so you're saying that makes you more open to the idea of an afterlife?
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that, with the experience that you have, I don't know, it's kind of, I'm not one to deny anybody their experience, because their experience is dictated by the brain. And I think that the brain is like, the brain is the machine that does the person. It creates the identity. But at the same time, because it does that, it's an illusion. There have been, like, basically aeronautics experts that have described helicopters as like 2 million parts flying in close formation. because a helicopter by design is just, you're like, that thing shouldn't be able to do what it's doing. And I think the brain is kind of the same way. It like, we're so fragmented in all our different processes, and especially our frontal lobe, which, you know, gives us that self-consciousness, that we're like, well, I'm stubborn. And it's like, well, no, if I went through your mental experiences, I could find equal parts where you're stubborn, and then equal parts experiences where you're like, I can give on that.
I'll give up.
And so I think character traits aren't stitched into people. They become basically like a baton that you're passed, and then you run with it, and then you pass it on. Like, basically, you pick it up where it's useful for you, and then you drop it off where it's not. I think people change in their mental state and what their motivations are, and I think that's what the brain does. So when the brain stops doing that, the illusion of, like, the self, the personality, it just dissolves into nothing. It's a brain pattern. It's electricity in the brain creating the person. That's where the soul is, and the soul isn't, like, local. It's the combined pattern.
It's funny, though, that you still use, like, the terminology soul.
It is what it is. The soul, the daemon, not Matt Damon, but the Greek word daemon.
Be specific.
The self.
That's interesting.
And so, like, you know, when people experience that, I think that's just one of those things where it's like, if it's quiet enough and you're tired enough, or you've had too much coffee, or you're in some type of brain state where you're not, like, actively ignoring stuff. Like, if you're thinking about other things and you're preoccupied and you're I wouldn't even say enhanced brain state, but just a different brain state than, you know, task oriented or on the phone with somebody, people audio hallucinate all the time.
True.
People, like, and the thing is, like, I think that a lot of these things, like, oh, I just saw a sign, and they're projecting what they want, or what their subconscious is just like, this fits the idea of the world that I live in, so obviously it's evidence for that. It's called confirmation bias, and I'm kind of being circuitous about it.
Interesting kind of. Mm-hmm. I actually sort of just remembered while you're talking, and this is kind of something that it goes against that. When I was very young, I was in elementary school, and there was a lady there. She was a crossing guard, and she also had other duties, which I was young, so I don't remember. I just remember that she was near the parent pickup. She would also help out with, like, parent pickup stuff. And you're making faces and distracting me. There's the sun in your eyes. You're, like, squinting. I can see this sunbeam, like, directly in your eye, and you're just making this crazy face the whole time I'm talking.
No, I was listening. You were talking about your school crossing guard.
Hard. Oh, my gosh. You're so distracting. Okay. I can't have a serious conversation when you're squinting and smiling.
I have a big purple dot in my vision.
Good.
Is that a ghost, or is it an artifact of the fact that I just burned
Maybe it's punishment for you being such a literal butt face.
Did I just burn some rods and cones at the back of my eye?
Maybe you burned some brain cells.
I don't know. That's what this is for. That's what the beer's for.
That's what the beer's for. Oh, dear. So anyways, she would help out with parent pickup. So even though I didn't walk home, we would have to wait in that area. She would help, get everybody ready, get you in the car, all that jazz. And when I was young, I would talk with her. I was really friendly with her. And I remember one day I was going in, if we got to school early enough, you had time to have sort of like a little mini recess. You could play outside in the little playground area. And I was in the back.
They let you on the playground so they could finish their lesson plans?
Well, yeah, well, it was before school started. I had to put you somewhere. And I had my jacket tied around my waist, and I had tossed it on the ground so I could run around with my friends. And
your jacket's on the ground.
Yes.
Okay.
We're headed back in, and I realized, oh no, I didn't put my jacket back on. It's in the back. So I told my teacher, I have to go grab it. And I went running back, and I saw this lady. And I saw her. She was, for some reason, in the back area, in the back of the field. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm grabbing my jacket. I forgot it. She goes, okay, goodbye. I said, what do you mean goodbye? School's starting. I'll see you later. And she goes, goodbye, sweetheart. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, you better hurry up. You're going to be late. So I just said, okay, goodbye. And I ran back inside. as soon as I got inside, they made an announcement over the loudspeaker that she had passed away the day before. And I freaked out, and I was like, no, I just saw her.
Right.
And I had kind of like a moment where they were like, do you need to go to the office?
So
do you need to go home?
This is a data point that's against the point I've been having, which is basically like, of course you're going to think about your relatives. Of course you're going to project anything that's coincidental.
That's why I wanted to bring it up.
And this is like, yeah.
It was so strange because, I mean, it was one of those things where I literally was just having this moment where they were like, she's having a mental breakdown, let's send her home. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I just talked to her. They're like, you were mistaken. You must have seen somebody else. So then I was like, yeah, I guess it must have been...
Right, it's like,
else.
shut up, kid.
I was like, no, but it wasn't. And I told my mom when I got home, and she was just like, oh my gosh, she came to say goodbye. And I just thought it was so weird because it happened so soon after I saw her that it was just like, I know I just saw her. So it was kind of an interesting moment that you can't really explain away with like, oh, you wanted to, you were thinking about her, or, you wanted to see that.
Yeah.
I just kicked a chair. I'm sorry.
No, I thought that was the AC turning on.
No.
Okay, no worries.
It's me not sitting still.
Okay. Yeah, I think okay, so if I were to believe in this kind of thing, I think that it would definitely need to be explainable. And I think it should be testable. And I'm not talking about that with the stupid ghost hunter tools, because what are they measuring? What are they?
Energy.
Right. But what? How do they know that? Like, what's the mechanism? Like, if I hold a lighter under if I hold like a Bunsen burner under a test tube, and I put water in the test tube, I know the mechanism of igniting butane is going to cause heat.
How do you know the mechanism?
Because it's been tested.
Exactly.
So the tool itself...
But do you think the first time somebody did that, everybody else was like, what are you doing? Why are you being so weird?
No, but basically the
Every
first
experiment works like that.
The first scientist wasn't the guy who ran around with boiling water saying, like, the gods gave me boiling water.
How do you know that? You don't know that. You weren't there.
His name was Prometheus, and he stole fire from the gods.
So there we go.
But that's my point. Is like he didn't run around with this. Like he didn't run around with a Basically, we tested in thermometers, right? Mm-hmm. And the etymology, epistemology, how we know what we know. That stands on the shoulders of geniuses going back 400 years and even further to antiquity.
Doesn't mean though that we can't discover new things.
Right, but the dorks running around with video cameras and infrared cameras saying this is how you detect ghosts, and it's like, first of all, you need to know what if a ghost interacts with the real world, if it interacts with us, then it's not supernatural, it's natural, which means the interaction can be studied.
You could say that, but I think a lot of these, somebody didn't just pull some EMF detector out of their ass.
I think they did.
No, they didn't. And go, I found ghosts.
They were listening to tapes way too loud, and they're like, shh, oh, I heard a noise in the pattern.
Well, but that's something where I think if people are using these tools, mm-hmm. the basis for it is things like when they're doing the FLIR...
forward-looking infrared.
When they're looking for things with that, it's because it's based on people saying, I feel weird changes in temperature when something strange happens.
Right.
When I had an experience with, something that I thought was a ghost,
right.
I detected it being cold, or I detected a really warm rush of air or something. So they're using these tools because they've noticed a correlation between things, like correlations between high energy levels and paranormal activity. Whether or not that's ghosts or, you don't know which one causes
But we
the
could
other.
find either a physicist or a highly specific localized meteorologist, like a weatherman, to say, how does the air in a room work? How does, and what could cause a sudden cold, is there a natural phenomenon that could explain, one end of a room going from hot to cold in a really quick period of time.
Well, there's lots of things to explain it.
Yes.
But lots of things, that's like a rush of air. It could be the fan. It could be me blowing air at you. It could be a crack in the door, the window, But that still you feel air.
Right.
So the end result is still the same. So just because one thing causes something doesn't rule out paranormal activity, in my opinion.
But to say, it's proof of paranormal activity, you're making a huge claim that
I
upends. Do you realize what would happen if the afterlife was a proven thing?
Well, that's why I think that most, I don't know if I want to say most, I don't want to generalize, I think that a lot of paranormal investigators that have, that are, what's the word I'm looking for?
Skeevy, hacks,
No.
frauds,
I'm looking for the opposite word.
Opportunists.
Stop. I'm going to smack you. Paranormal investigators that are responsible, they don't make claims such as this is proof positive of paranormal activity.
It's something. Yeah.
They say that, at the same time this chair went flying at my head, I detected this, which you can say that it has some sort of natural explanation, but to me, paranormal doesn't necessarily mean that it's not natural phenomenon. Kind of like people can have defects in their genes that are natural, but it's going to result in them being not the same as another individual. They're going to look different, or they're going to have different abilities, but they're still a person. It's still natural. A ghost didn't do it. But
a mutation occurred,
but it's still that's still within the realm of like nature and science.
Plausibility,
and this is normal.
Yeah.
So any sort of paranormal activity, like maybe a deceased relative somehow manifesting whatever energy form they have become, wouldn't necessarily be unnatural, because you say, well, it's still something natural that we can study.
And I'm saying
it could be.
No, it would be moved into the realm of, if we can study it, if it has an impact on the physical world, then it moves out of paranormal into, okay, it's normal, we just don't understand it yet. It's a natural phenomenon.
I can see that, but my argument is that I think sometimes when we call things paranormal, it takes away from... It delegitimizes them. It makes it so that people don't want to admit to studying whether or not ghosts are real. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about last episode with Chris, where if you're having strange experiences and you talk about it, you don't want people to go, oh, that guy's weird. You don't want to be like, that scientist isn't a real scientist. Like, he looks for ghosts, which I don't think we should treat it that way.
No.
Because
it makes for great movies.
Like, it does, but it takes away
I'm talking about Ghostbusters and the remake.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But it takes away, though, from actual scientists wanting to conduct this type of research, because it's like, well, if you're looking for that, you're desperate, you desperately miss somebody, you're very sad about it,
right?
Or you're just nuts, you're not a real scientist, and I don't think that's fair to do.
Yeah. To
take something that could very well be natural and turn it into something, that's like, oh, it's spooky and we don't talk about it.
Right. If I were to, like, I don't know, part of me thinks that I've read a couple different things with regards to this. I think one of the possible natural phenomenons, if a lot of the paranormal things that we talk about on this show are real, is something that you hear it and you're like, huh, and it's almost akin to a religious belief. But the religious hate it because it kills their, theology, is that simulation theory. Okay. We're all in a giant program simulation of a universe.
Yes, I've heard this theory.
Yeah, Elon Musk has floated the idea because basically he realizes, like, oh, AI, we can make a computer that's smart. What stops the computer from being twice as smart or 10 times as smart? If we teach it to think, and the only thing... Like, why would we assume it gets to our level and just plateaus? Like, a learning computer that can teach itself and can educate itself about the physical world.
That's why I don't trust machines.
The AI could feasibly, like, get to a super intelligence where it creates a universe and a simulation of the world we're living in. And Elon Musk is like, I think we might be living in a simulation, but he still wants to die on simulated Mars. So I applaud him for not, like, lying in bed every day. Just being like, what's the point? We're all just
This is why I don't trust
bots in
any
the system,
robots.
man.
I don't trust them.
Right.
Despite when I was a kid loving dinosaurs and loving Short Circuit, my parents were like, "Oh, she'll love these animatronic dinosaurs." It was probably the Science Museum or something, and I was not okay with them. I was like, "Do not." I'm staying over here. I am looking at them from afar.
Yeah.
And I kept yelling at all my relatives. I went with like my mom, my dad, and my grandparents. I was like, "Look out!" My parents were like, "You just please stop." Like every time one of them moved, if anybody was anywhere near, I was like, "Look out! It's gonna get you!" My parents were just like, "We thought you were gonna like this. This was supposed to be a fun thing." And instead, the whole time I was just like paranoid, and I was like on edge, like looking back and forth, like, "Oh my God, they're surrounding me."
And one of the that's
so to me,
just,
I don't want to think that.
Right,
it's
the robot, like
brain overload.
They're just robots. That's funny. The other thing is, and I think this could be true, but it's not provable, it's not disprovable, because science doesn't look for a why. Like, like there are some scientists and religions that say, "Oh, well, science studies how things go, how things work, the kind of mechanism of everything." Religion studies the why, like purpose.
I've heard that.
And
I've heard that.
I don't necessarily believe that. I believe that the religion also tries to impose itself on the how, so that it can basically have a more believable why.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that is a scientific theory is that with the multiverse theory and with black holes being generated naturally through the creation of galaxies, which is an end result of the Big Bang. It's been posited by theoretical physicists, obviously not applied physicists, because we haven't studied a black hole up close, is that when on the other side of a black hole, basically when it gets to the point where like not even light can escape, it gets to a singularity. On the other side of that singularity, a new Big Bang happens, and a new universe happens on the other side of that. I think that it's possible that the universe exists to create copies of itself, and black holes are the reproductive mechanism through which it does it, which means organic life is just like happy accident.
I see what you're saying,
but I find that appealing, because the history of science has done everything to tell the human brain and human society over the course of thousands of years that, hey, you're not the center of the universe. Hey, you're not the center of the solar system. Yes. Hey, you're not the center of the galaxy.
But we're the center of our own worlds.
Right. But isn't that an interesting paradox?
Well, the thing that, like you say that science is the how and religion is the why.
I didn't say that. It's not my quote, but I'm paraphrasing. I think it's
paraphrased for us so eloquently, Nicholas Jones. I think, though, yes, part of any religion is trying to explain things before there was science to tell us.
Right, I think.
But at the same time,
yes.
How do you make a convincing lie? What is the best way to make a lie?
Make it personal?
No. Put enough truth.
I'm on board with you 100%. I'm 100% with you right there, because I think religion, and this includes all religions. Sorry, Mom.
Are you gonna hurt my feelings?
No, because it's a choice that you make, but at the same time, it's kind of it's endearing.
I think you just called me endearing.
Yeah.
I feel so patronized right now.
I know. Like, oh, what a smug prick.
What a smug little atheist over there.
Yeah.
You don't believe in you Christians, or you pagans, or you...
I think religion was early humans' first attempts at science.
I think, like I said, that... Are my religious beliefs exactly conventional? No.
We were bad at math, but we were just as creative as we are now.
Mine are a little bit more fluid than some individuals, but
right.
I still do think that there is some basis in any...
For pantheism? I agree.
Well, in any of the old religions, I don't think that people were just doing this to try to explain things, and my basis is I see a lot of and this could have happened over time, because obviously we are getting the old religions as they have been mixed up and twisted and bumped into each other, But it's very funny how a lot of different religions that are very far from each other and supposedly the people haven't had a lot of interaction with each other.
Venn diagram overlap?
Yeah, they have a lot of overlap. Like, they both have a god that's in charge of this, or a goddess in charge of that. And it's like, well, that's kind of weird that you can draw a little bit of overlap there. To me, I just find, when I see a lot of coincidences, and I'm not like, well, isn't that an interesting coincidence? I'll go about my day with my science. I tend to think like, well, if that's, so many coincidences aren't a coincidence anymore. So that leads me to think that maybe people did, have some basis for things. And I find it funny how there aren't really any religions. There aren't any really, you don't read any old beliefs of where they were like, and then we die and it's over. And, and if you think about that, isn't that interesting that there doesn't seem to be any information, like, were there in the olden days, were there atheists,
like, I was gonna say, even the Buddhist thinks it's a reboot.
Years ago. And that's the thing is, I don't really, I don't think that there is, that you can discount reincarnation, because I think there's also a lot of interesting information out there on that. I think we'll have to do an episode on that where we talk about reincarnation.
Okay.
Because I think that kind of goes along with, well, what happens when you die.
What's the world population right now?
I don't know.
I'm
bad at math.
It's 7-point-something billion.
So?
What was the world population 30 years ago?
Waiting for you to answer.
4-point-something billion.
Okay.
So in the last several decades, the world has grown to a population with more people being alive as, basically, I think...
well, then you can get into where religions...
I think for every living person, there's been 10 dead people.
You can get into, all sorts of stuff.
But the population could grow to the point where there are more people alive, at that time, than there were ever dead in the history of humanity. So where's reincarnation?
Where does somebody start? So you're saying there's no beginning?
Oh, God.
It's
turtles.
I saw you just, stop.
It's turtles all the way down.
You thought you were going to be able to, come back at me, and you just stopped?
No, because you actually, that's a gotcha question. It's called an infinite regress.
Gotcha.
There's no beginning. It just goes on forever.
Because that's what I'm saying. You can't just say the same 5 people reincarnate forever, and there's only ever 5 people. Uh-huh. Because that wouldn't make sense, because if all 5 people are reincarnated at the same time, and they procreate, where does that person come from? Did that person have to start?
Are you saying they were a dead vessel of nothing, and then the grandma died, and then it's like, oh, that's when Tommy got his personality?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. No, that's what I'm saying is I don't think that happens.
He's going out for the school play. This is so unlike him.
We will save this for
his
the
grandmother
reincarnation
loved musicals.
I'm going to fist fight with you right now. We're going to save this for the reincarnation episode, but I do have some listener stories here.
Okay.
We got a couple emails. Let me pull those up.
Yeah, we should pay attention to our listeners. We keep telling them to interact.
I pay attention to our listeners,
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Says the guy that's like, maybe we should... Oh, you already did that? Well, that's nice. Well, maybe we should put us up on... Oh, okay, cool, you did that too.
Okay.
Yes, Nicholas Jones.
Are we going to fight on the show?
Yes, we're fighting on the show. On-show fight.
Yeah.
Anyways, this story was submitted to us by Dominica in Arizona.
Hi, Dominica. Thank you for writing us. I promise not to be too shitty.
I'll slap him, it's fine. I can almost reach you across the table. Dominica writes, this story is from November 2013. It was the Thursday before Thanksgiving. I was 36 weeks pregnant with my son Dante when my grandfather had a stroke. For a person living with a rare disease, which resulted in him undergoing a kidney transplant 7 years earlier, it was a miracle he had made it this far. But our family knew that his time had now come. My grandfather, an immigrant to the U.S. from Lebanon, was a family man who always aspired to give his children and their children a better paved path in life. It's not a surprise that his wife, 6 children, and most of his 16 grandchildren took turns rallying around him over his final last days. He passed away peacefully that Saturday night, surrounded by his family. Being 37 weeks along and a high-risk patient, I was devastated. I could not fly from Arizona to Pennsylvania to say my goodbyes and attend services. On Tuesday, the day of his funeral, I noticed a yellow balloon on my patio, just gracefully floating from corner to corner, and finally it rested in one spot. Normally I would have thrown it out, but the oddity of the situation prompted me to leave it be. When I spoke to my mom on the phone later that day, I brought up the yellow balloon, and she couldn't believe it. When I asked her what the big deal was, she explained to me that yellow had been my grandfather's favorite color, and yellow roses were present at his services. The balloon stayed deflating on my patio for 2 weeks until I threw it out the day I brought my son home from the hospital. My son was his first great-grandchild and came into this world through a very scary birth that resulted in me almost losing him. I believe the yellow balloon was my grandfather's way of saying he was with me and all was going to be okay. Dominica. And she even thought that this was such when she saw this balloon, she thought that it was such an interesting sign. She actually took a picture of this, which she submitted to us, and I'm actually going to post that on the Instagram so everyone can look at that picture.
Yeah.
So thank you, Dominica. That was really sweet. That's
really a sad story that you're bringing. You know, your grandfather's first great grandchild. Like those firsts are big firsts, right? Like I'm not the oldest grandchild of my dad's family, but I am for my mom's because my mom was the oldest and I was the first. And so just like I don't know to lose him and then not be able to visit because you are a high risk, or it could have an impact on your child. It's like, what happens if you do visit and you catch, MRSA or some other antibiotic-resistant bacterial infection,
or even just a plain flight there,
right? Or
wouldn't be possible.
And then lose your son, and it's like that would be twice. Like I if it were me, I wouldn't get over the guilt of that, right? So that's crushing, and I hope that was your grandfather. I don't have any evidence to, say like it was. I don't, and because I don't have evidence that it was, other than just your thoughts and what he meant to you, and the strange occurrence of this thing that is out of the ordinary, right? I'm not about to say that it wasn't either. It's like one of those things where that's I think on our first episode, or at least with Chris last time. I didn't describe myself as an atheist. I don't honestly think I'm I'm an agnostic atheist, which means that I don't claim to know there's no God. I don't know the answer, but I don't like when people say definitively, I know the answer, and it's like, you got as much information as I do, dude. Like, so
Nicholas Jones is the equivalent when you see one of those houses listed, and it's that make me move. I'm not really listing my house, but if you like it enough, I might sell it. You're like, come on.
Yeah.
You're the person. You are the personification of that real estate situation.
Yeah, I could be. I could actually. If I could be incentivized to believe if I had enough evidence to do so.
These are the kind of
and
stories.
And that's actually that's a good metaphor. And one of the things that it also does is it kills people's fundamentalism. And I think because if you're just like, well, if you don't believe exactly the way I do, or if you don't actually actively think this thing, then I believe you're going to burn for eternity. Okay, who's going to make that choice? Well, God is. Okay. You like me, right? Yeah, you're a nice guy. Your family, I love you. Okay. So you think that God's going to burn me forever, and you worship him 52 times a week. Awesome.
I think for me, that's why it's a bit easier for me to believe these kinds of stories, is I don't have a set, real fluid belief system. Like some people have, I believe this and this and this. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of like, all right, sure. Yeah, maybe. That could be.
It's not cafeteria. Like I've heard, you and I both grew up Catholic, so it's like we hear cafeteria Catholics. Guess what? Everybody's a cafeteria whatever.
I don't consider myself to have a real set belief system.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of that, not saying you don't have humanity, Nicholas, but I think some of that gives me more humanity because it makes it easier for me to identify with other individuals' beliefs.
I think you're approachable and relatable more than I am.
Potentially.
Like ground
for me,
given, yeah.
If I saw something like that, if I had a relative die, whether or not I knew that was their favorite color, if I saw a balloon just kind of floating like that,
mm-hmm.
I would find it hard not to consider it a sign,
Right.
especially, knowing that this was something she was definitely thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you said, it would be horrible knowing you can't visit, but you have to do what's best for your child. You can't make that flight, and to see that would be a wonderful reminder. And, I'd like to think if there's any way that a family member could reach out, especially the way she describes her grandfather, that definitely sounds like, he would have wanted to give her some sort of a sign, or, just to reassure her that he knew she didn't need to actually physically be there. He still felt that love. So I think that was a good thing, and also to kind of reassure her, maybe even for the upcoming birth of her child,
Right.
to let her know.
I think that's a phenomenon of like grief and regret and powerlessness in the face of death, and how we act, like how much and with like the concentration, the purity with which we love the people that are our family. I think that speaks to, like, when I had family members pass away, they're like, the harder you cry, it's a symbol of how much you cared. Like, that's a measure of your grief and love. Like, and so I think too, and I'm not saying this is the case. I could just say, like, you and I can do a thought experiment that kind of puts our mind in the same way without feeling those same feelings. Like, I want you tomorrow, if you go out in public and you have the day off, but if you choose to like go out. Or if I go out tomorrow and I'm at work, I want you to think about the color red. Just pretend for that day that the color red is something that's on your mind. It's significant to you. And you're either going to find the color red everywhere, or you're going to see it occasionally, but it's going to jump out at you. And it's going to seem significant. And it's only significant because I put that in your head today.
I think part of that too,
You see what I'm saying? Like
I see
I'm saying
that.
This is all just... Like, these are switches and levers and throttles that are in the brain.
I think for someone like me, though, that sees signs more often than some people.
Than me.
Than most, I would say.
I need to be hit over the head.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty dense.
But I think that for me, I see signs easier than some people, and I don't necessarily... Maybe some of that has to do with, superstition or religious beliefs. But at the same time, I think... perhaps we're more open to signs after somebody has passed. It doesn't mean that you don't get signs from deceased relatives all the time. It means that maybe someone like you has received a sign,
right,
and you just didn't notice it because you're
in some ways... Because I throw that into the background
Yeah,
noise.
you're so closed off to it that you see something.
My signal to noise ratio, I'm just like, that's a bunch of noise.
Because I feel like if the same thing happened to you, you'd be like, what's this stupid balloon doing here? And you would be so... It wouldn't be something that would cross your mind because of the way you think, that it could be a sign,
right,
and you wouldn't necessarily see it. So that's why when I asked you, like, are you sure you've never, ever had a sign from a relative? Maybe you have, and you just didn't notice it.
Yeah.
So, that's why I would say...
I could be blind to the...
Think about it,
I could be blinding myself to the opportunity.
Well, we have another story here. This story was submitted by Emily. She says, "Hi,
Thank you, Emily.
Hi, I'm
sorry,
Emily.
Dominica. Sorry for your loss of your grandfather. That's rough. I hope you're doing well, and I
he
hope
sounds
your
like a
son's
wonderful
doing awesome.
person. So I'm really glad you shared that with us.
I am too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I live in Arizona. So about 2 years ago, my best friend's mom passed away. I went to her memorial, and I brought home a red Solo cup full of her favorite flowers. Don't you dare start singing Red Solo Cup. I can see you.
Okay.
This is a serious moment, Nicholas. Put your serious face on.
I did not read this before I started talking.
I knew I shouldn't have said Solo Cup. The moment I said it, I was like, he's thinking of that stupid song.
No. I'm not here. No, I'm talking about Red.
All right.
I did not read that before I started talking about it. Hey, as a thought experiment.
I guess what? Maybe it's a sign kicking you in the teeth, sir.
Or maybe it's just exactly the point I'm making.
The email was already here, pal.
Okay.
A red Solo cup full of her favorite flowers. About a month afterwards, I came home along with my best friend, and I walk in to see a single flower on the ground that had come from that cup. We didn't have animals. It had been sitting on a top shelf. We turned off our AC that day, and there was a cover over the cup, and it was still on there when I came home. And I feel as though it was her mom telling my best friend that she was okay, because she had passed away at such a young age and for unknown reasons. That was from Emily. So that's really interesting. It sounds like she had, like, she was drying the flowers or
Mhm.
keeping them. So she had that cup on the shelf
The
with
red
the cover still on it. I'm going to kick you under the table. And when she got home, that cover was still there, but a flower had somehow been removed from the cup and was on the floor. I found that pretty interesting.
Like the whole flower, not a petal.
No, like a whole flower, and the lid was still on that cup that she had.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a little hard to explain away because, you know, if the cup had tipped over or, you know, the top was off, it would make you think that it had just fallen.
Raccoons.
Raccoons?
Could be raccoons.
Raccoons. Do we have a raccoon problem here?
Well, raccoons get on the porch. Mama just sweep them off with a broom.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah.
Have you had that experience?
Not here.
Hey, no! She stated she's from here.
Javelinas.
Javelinas?
The blind.
All right. I'll admit we have those here, but if a javelina can get in your house, remove a lid or a cover, take out one little flower, and put the cover back without disturbing anything, that animal should have its own YouTube channel.
Well, you never underestimate the ferocity and power of blind, dumb, wild boers. So, thank you, Emily. That's a really good story about your best friend and her family. It's one of those things where I've experienced that more than once in my life, where somebody passes away and then, like, you know, like, time goes by and they're just like, I became at peace with it. I'm always going to grieve, but, you know, I saw something and it made me think, like, she's still out there. She's okay. I don't need to worry. And it's like, there's something. I think there's a couple different mental, like, cognitive processes that are stacked on top of each other that are probably the result of, like, emotional reasoning, but at the same time it's like, I'm not going to tell you that's not true, because, like, I don't know through what mechanism that you thought these thoughts. They may have bubbled up out of the ether, and for all I know, the ether is where your family is, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like the phenomenon of deep thought and that subconscious thought. It's like we aren't in control of it. Where does an idea come from? As a writer or a performer, like, oh, I had this idea. What made you think of the idea? Oh, is it something referential or derivative? Okay, where did that come from? And we aren't necessarily responsible for our thoughts and what, you know, like, we're not you know what I'm saying?
I have a question for you.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you think you're pretty unique? Are you special, Nicholas?
No.
No?
No.
And so the reason I asked you that is a close family member, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, he would say the same thing if I asked him. My grandfather. Do you think you're special? No, not really. Do you think you're something, you know, different? Are there people out there just like you? He would say, you know, I'm pretty average. There's people just like me. Mm-hmm. He thinks the same thing you do. He thinks that, well, when life stops, I stop. Uh-huh. And I think part of that has to do with thinking, well, there's a bunch of other people out there, so why do I deserve to continue? Uh-huh. And I think... Oh,
you are putting me on the couch.
I'm putting you
now.
on the couch. I am. Yeah, you're like
you have a
scooching
low self-esteem,
away.
Therefore,
I don't think it's a
therefore your lack of belief.
No, I don't think it's low self-esteem.
From...
I would definitely, especially with my grandfather, I would never say he has low self-esteem. But I think that he doesn't see himself as above or as
but your perspective
above and beyond.
On yourself is rooted in kind of a self, like a...
You're putting yourself on the couch
like
here, pal.
Ego or lack of it, or
I wouldn't even say
or desire to have no ego.
I wouldn't even say ego because I have met individuals who have quite the ego, but they still not you, okay. But they still seem to think, you know, life stops. But a lot of it is, I think, it's a lack of desire to call yourself special or an inability to see that you're unique because you think, oh, I'm just a person. There's lots of people like me. They do the same kind of people things. But I think for people that maybe don't have a strong religious belief but still feel that life continues, they have that little bit of like, well, you know, I'm unique. My friends are unique. There's no one else quite like them. And they deserve to continue. I think a lot of that stems from it would be a waste if we just stopped.
Yeah, but what a poem we get to write while we're here.
For some of us.
Yeah.
Is yours quite the poem?
I keep rewriting.
But that's the point, is I don't think it's fair to say that life stops, because not only does it discount so many wonderful experiences that people have had, not only does it go against so many different religions of the world, but I don't think it makes sense that all this energy that, makes us up, whatever you think it is, whatever makes up our personalities, what makes us unique, I don't think it's fair to think that that just stops. And I know maybe some people say that lives on in our families.
What if I think it's lucky to happen in the first place? That's the miracle.
Is that the miracle for you?
Yeah.
Just lucky to be here? You're just a roll of the dice?
Yeah. I think I've thoroughly observed in my life, and my observation of other people living their lives, that the magnitude of our insignificance and irrelevance with respect to like our lives versus the universe we live in and the scale. But at the same time, I don't fall into despair.
See, I have those moments where I think I'm so tiny and insignificant, but at the same time, I am so stubborn and so petty. I got a list of people I got to haunt. So I'm sticking around. If something happens to me, I'm like, all right, pull out that list. I'm going to your house. You're going to have some paranormal activity. I'm going to your house. I'm going to be that funny noise in your car that your mechanic can never figure out. I'm just going to be a pest. You don't have to believe in me.
Right.
I'll be there.
You're the universe's squeaky wheel.
That's me. So I think that regardless of what, you say, or even if science proved it wrong.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this to you to convince you. I'm just having the conversation.
Personally.
I'm peeing on the campfire while looking up at the Milky Way and saying, this is one of a billion galaxies and I'm in it and it's huge. And
I'm just saying that I am going to stubborn myself right into continued existence long after my heart stops beating and brain stops working.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm one of those people that there's a lot of energy, and I think it's got to go somewhere. And I think I'm just stubborn enough to make it stick around or find out what goes, afterwards.
Well, I think that about does it for the Dead Relatives episode.
That about does it?
Well, we've talked for about an hour.
Yeah.
That's a lot longer than we've gone previously. And I think we covered kind of... I hope at least this conversation is something that is accessible, is universal, that I'm not specializing, or I'm not specifically critiquing Christianity. It just happens to be, what I grew up in. When like I've had conversations with mom and dad where they worry about me, and I'm just like, you know what? My heart and my mind are open. Christ can walk in at any time, and maybe part of that is like their perception is, well, you're just too closed-minded to begin with. And I heard a little bit of that tonight. Where it's like, hey, maybe you're deliberately like closing yourself off from these other... From
a very different religious perspective.
Yeah.
You're getting attacked from every religion. Look at that.
So that's what I'm saying is like, it's not just, Jesus. And I'm not rejecting Jesus. I would say I've got a friend in Jesus. But when it comes to, like, where your relatives go, like, I would give so much just to see my loved ones that have passed on. And, I don't think that they, like, I hope they're at peace if they exist consciously somewhere, but I don't have any evidence or reason or suspicion that they interact with Earth anymore or my daily life. And so, like, with this conversation, it's like, that maybe that's how I grieve. Basically, everybody gets the same ending, and there's no justice to it, but there's no pain.
Maybe you find comfort in that.
Right. Maybe that's where, like, obviously there are reasons why I believe what I believe. I think they're evidentiary, but they could very well be psychological, right? And it could be the reason why somebody believes that, they're on their fifth life. Like, hey, I'm on the fifth, like, I'm back on the carousel, right?
So I think speaking of that, I think maybe we should make an upcoming episode, I think we're going to do reincarnation.
I think that's a good idea.
So if any of you have any stories, if you feel that you have been reincarnated, if you know someone that has had an experience and you want to talk to us about it.
If you've had a memory of a past life.
Anything like that, past life regression. We want to hear about it. We also want to hear if you think that we're wrong. If you want to disagree with us.
If you have a counter argument, if you want to definitely bring that to my doorstep, please definitely get in contact with us. I can be found on Twitter and yelled at Nicholas Edward J. Heidi, our email is
campfirecurmudgeon@gmail.com.
And we can also tweet at us at CFCurmudge. That's C, capital F, Curmudge without the
Eon.
Without the Eon. So basically it's without the O-N. Instagram is...
It's Campfire Curmudgeon.
Follow us at Campfire Curmudgeon on
Follow
Instagram.
us there. That's where you'll see Domenica's picture, and that's where you'll see all sorts of fun behind-the-scenes style pictures.
So yeah, I do want to thank you for sharing with us some sensitive stories and stuff that's close to the heart. That I don't know if it took a lot of courage, but at the same time, you put it out there for me to critique and to have me hear it without knowing how I was going to approach my honest feelings about your experience. And I hope I didn't come off as a capricious dick or smug or that I know more than you. Usually, my answer to most things when the suspicion is that hey, this thing happened and it's Bigfoot, and I'm just like, well, I don't know. So that's the conclusion I jump to the most is I don't know.
So we want to thank you for sending those stories to us. We want to encourage you to send us more, especially if you would like to argue with Nicholas. I know that he's always up for that on his Twitter. You can definitely send us your stories specifically for that. But we want to thank everybody that continues to send those in, and thanks for listening.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time with Reincarnation. Have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, commute, laundromat, whatever.
I'm going to lick this microphone.
Okay. You weirdo. You owe me a new dust cover.
No, I don't.
What?
I have a little tiny voice.
You have a tiny voice. Our listeners are going to love that. Our listener is going to love that.
Hey, we have at least... I'm a fish.
Well, so far this track is off to a banging start.
Why are you looking at me like you're so mad? Like you're supposed to have something to say.
Because we're recording.
I know we are. You're so mad about it. I don't have anything to say.
So the first 5 minutes of this are a complete wash.
Oh, thanks. Do you ever have an overwhelming urge to lick your microphone?
No.
Okay, just me.
You're like,
It's got like that nice foamy stuff.
To quote from Whitman, "O me, O life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?